All right, final one of the day. How do you go to the renal system? Thank you. Again, that's part of it out. Say again. It is. You'll see why you're coming. Blood. Yeah, I guess in a way, in terms of the background. Yeah, that's how I go. There you go. Good. So, does urine start in the kidneys? In other words, when it comes out of the kidneys, is that urine? We'll talk about that. Probably something else about the renal system. Good. So electrolytes is key in terms of this, as to how well and how much. So sometimes sodium is given off in this renal system we're talking about. Sometimes it's kept. Sometimes potassium, the same thing. You have somebody with hyperkalemia. It's excreted through the kidneys. So there's a, you think about somebody in renal failure that has hyperkalemia, how well the kidneys would have functioned in terms of getting rid of potassium. It's not. What else about it? So we're talking about renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system, or RAS, R-A-S-S, R-A-A-S. Regulation of blood pressure. Main regulation. So a number of different things that we're going to jump into. So you should know this. And it's probably in addition to what you've gotten into for the most part to this point. Coordinated with the digestive, cardiovascular, and respiratory system. That is, it gives off urine or gives off fluid in terms of the urine over a period of time. Main function is to remove organic waste. Regulating blood volume and blood pressure. Regulating plasma concentration of ions. Ions is about pH. Ions is about acid. Helping to stabilize blood pH. Conserving valuable nutrients. Kidneys are about the size of the fist, a little bit bigger than a fist on either side. Okay. The thing is that where they sit, they're much higher than what most people get credit for. That is, if you take one trauma to the back here, this retroperitoneal area, the idea if you take a slap to that, then this can start bleeding out in a huge way. Okay? There's renal arteries that we'll talk about that go into each one of the cases. So the idea that you have bleeding into this space, and oh, by the way, your blood pressure is going to be down the tubes, no pun intended. Yep.
So in boxing, you knock somebody out by like a face shot or a kidney shot.
Yep.
How does the kidney shot knock out?
Same thing. It's going to be an issue in terms of them being able to sustain over a period of time. You have ureters that transport urine from the kidneys to the bladder. You have a urinary bladder with temporary storage of urine. And then you have your urethra, both male and female, carries urine from the bladder as it leaves the body. We kind of talked about this already. Right kidney sits a little bit lower than the left, lies between the dorsal body wall and the peritoneal lining. What's dorsal? That, right? Renal artery and nerves enter the kidney at the level of the ileum. Right? So the idea, and I think I've got better. Yeah, there we go. So the idea in terms of this is a cross section of the kidney, if you will. We'll get more into this in just a second. But the idea that you've got artery that comes into the side, okay, and you've got veins that is going to transport blood back out again. But what I was talking about just a second ago, that if you end up taking blood trauma into this neck right here, the kidneys are on this shearing type of thing. So any shot, any significant shot in terms of the kidneys, the artery is going to be affected by that and can start bleeding out because of that. The kidneys itself, this brown space right here is like a fat type thing that encompasses the kidneys and helps protect it. It's one of the things that keeps it from being damaged over a period of time. There's this renal capsule, and this whole thing right here is this capsule. And think about this again as being a cross-section, because there's millions and millions and millions of the nephrons that we're going to talk about. And that's these right here. Within each one of these spots right here, this pyramid's right here, there are millions of nephrons that all produce the same thing. Packed in a soft cushion of adipose tissue and suspensory collagen fiber. So it's fat that kind of surrounds us to help protect it. It's about 4 inches, big. So again, just a little bit bigger than your fist. About 3 centimeters thick. Weighs 150 grams. Not very much at all. Very, very light. Unless you're looking at somebody with renal failure, then you're looking at the big old kidney along the way. So all by itself doesn't look spectacular, and yet it does the work of horses. Covers the surface of this kidney. So the renal capsule is this that covers the surface of the kidney. Lines the renal sinus as well. This renal cortex, okay, this right here. All this right here is a renal cortex. Renal medulla is this inner portion right here with all these pyramids.
Why is there such a wide range of 6 to 8?
So great question. The idea in terms of this 6 to 18 is typically about a more healthy adult male than it is about somebody that is sick. And how that works anatomically, I couldn't tell you.
It's not like a race thing or anything.
No.
So as you say you're nearing renal failure, you're more than likely going to have more medullas.
No, it has nothing to do with that. It's just anatomically that you're born with somewhere between 6 and 18. Okay. But the idea that the greater you have, the better function you have in terms of your kidney. Okay. I guess the way to say that. All right, so check this out. The idea that you have the artery that comes into this and the vein that comes out of this and this helium that kind of supports, this is where the suspension of the kidney takes place right here. So again, it's like the shearing type thing. Any shearing type trauma that can create issues in terms of bleeding out. Okay? So this coming down here is a urine. Okay? Take a look at this. The idea that you have each one of these is medulla. Within the medulla is the nephrons. Okay? This I'm going to show you. We're going to stop over the hand in terms of this little diagram right here. Okay? And this is the way that urine is produced and excreted from the body. And I'll show you this a little bit more. Okay? These renal pyramids then go throughout. And this is called a major calyx. This idea in terms of the pyramids coming off of that. And again, this is the renal capsule that kind of supports them. You have 4 to 5 minor calyxes merge into the 2 major calyxes. So what we're talking about is this area right in here. Major calyxes combine to form the renal pelvis. That's right here. And then there's a large funnel pelvis connected to the ureter that carries urine out of the body. So again, when you break this down, okay, this is smaller. This is truly microscopic. This is not organic. This is microscopic. You have the kid again sliced on the kidney where you see what you're seeing here. But the direction of that, what it looks like in each one of these right here is a little nephron, okay, and all this works in terms of certain direction to carry urine outside the body. Okay? And they all have functions in terms of their job. And I'll show you here in just a second. Each kidney contains 1.25 million nephrons. Crazy in terms of amount. Except what? Except who? Who would not have that many? Yeah, that'd be one. I'll get a perfectly honest. You guys are awesome. Renal failure. Renal failure. There you go. The idea, diabetics typically, but renal failure, yes. The idea that the nephrons are not working the way they used to. Those that have kidney infections very, very frequently or often, The idea in terms of nephrons working well, not so much.
But people like these stones.
There's some evidence about that, but it's not linked directly. Check this out. The blood supply to the kidney, 20 to 25% of the entire cardiac output is in the lung. I'll tell you something about the fact that somebody gets a shot in the kidney that the possibility going to bleed out. Renal artery originates in the abdominal aorta. So think about this for just a second. What happens when somebody has a triple A? Abdominal aortic aneurysm.
Includes the blood flow from the kidney.
Not only the kidneys, but to all the lower extremities. But you're exactly right. The idea that one of the major functions is about blood pressure. So somebody with an abdominal aortic aneurysm that's bleeding out does not have the benefit of the kidneys working the way they're supposed to, which is one of the reasons that they end up in the huge body. Renal artery and the nerve enter the kidney at the ileum. Again, this is the area we're talking about. Renal artery enters the renal sinus, and again, that's all this right here. The renal sinus divides into branches, and then finally into these pyramids that we're talking about already. So check this. You need to know this. Blood supply to the kidneys, there's something that's called afferent arterioles. They branch from the interlobular arteries. They deliver blood to the capillaries. So afferent going into efferent coming out of it. We're talking about efferent in a second. Efferent, there's blood supply. Yes. Okay. Yeah. But this is more specific in terms of doing that. I'm going to show you this little triangular thing right here, where it kind of circles, a traffic circle, if you will. That is pretty neat. Afferent, that is carrying blood away from. And so afferent into, afferent away from. And anytime you see that word, it's always the same. Afferent into, afferent away from. So blood travels to the peritubular capillaries. That's all this right here. That's what we're talking about with this right here. So we're going to dig into proximal and distal convoluted tubules. That's part of this right here. And as we show up a greater diagram about this, you'll kind of get that idea. There it is. All right. So the nephron itself, if you were to show it in the diagram, this is kind of what it looks like right here. So remember that there's a million of these sitting in each one of the kidneys. And the whole thing about it is that it's going to take fluid out of the kidneys. So all the stuff that's been going on, it's going to carry it out of the kidneys into waste. That's part of what it does. But in order to do that, it does some pretty interesting things. So we said afferent, it does what? It goes into, and efferent's going to carry it out. So this little globe right here almost looks like a traffic circle, if you will. So fluid is coming out of the kidneys via the nephrons. So the idea that blood supply is moving this along, and so through diffusion and osmosis, blood supplies with the waste products into it will continue moving along, and some of the waste products get reabsorbed, some of the water gets reabsorbed, some of the glucose gets reabsorbed, some of the ions get reabsorbed, some get excreted. So to that, the idea around this traffic circle is part of that. Okay? So into, out. So the rest of this then breaks down in terms of fluids moving along, and then outside to the bladder and to the ureters. Okay. So we're going to take a little bit closer look. I think there's a better picture that's going to show this. Okay. But the travel of this is called a renal corpuscle. That's right here. It's also known as Bowman's loop. You don't even know that right now, but the days coming with Bowman's loop will be part of that in terms of this little ball that's here. Okay. Let's see a better picture. Yeah. There we go. So this is what we were just talking about in terms of afferent versus efferent right here. Okay. So all this right here. That's this right here. So the direction it's going to go from there then is it's going to hang with me for just a second, folks. All right, disregard this. What I want. Okay. Aberrant, aberrant, same thing. Okay. But if you were to diagram this, this is what it looks like. Okay. So within the nephron, they have these kind of orphans. Okay. This is called, this whole loop right here is called proximal convoluted tubule. Proximal being what? Closest to, right? So the idea in terms of what's closest to the Bowman's loop or glomerulus is reabsorption of water, ions, and all organic nutrients. So in other words, when electrolytes need to come back into the system, that's what's going to happen right here. The way this happens is through diffusion all by itself. So it moves outside of the bloodstream in terms of being absorbed back into the body. So from there, it's going to go down this long loop right here. Actually, it's not all that long, but the loop right here. So this is called a descending limb right here. Okay, and again, this is still carrying waste products and water and lines up. Okay, this right down here, this loop that ends up in the opposite direction, is called the loop of Henry. Loop of Henry. So the idea that diuretics, when we give a diuretic, when we give Lasix, when we give iodine, it has its greatest effect right here. So what happens in this descending and ascending loop is that there's further reabsorption of water. Both sodium and chloride ions are kicked out right here or reabsorbed right here. Okay? So remember, nephrons, blood supply, moves this loop right here. Okay? Makes this turn. We're now talking about the ascending limb. And the difference between the descending limb and the ascending limb is that this is more towards water. The ions and the electrolytes have been reabsorbed at this point. So it's more about kicking out of water. So it continues up through the distal convoluted tubule. And at this point, it's primarily water that's going to be turned into urine. So the urine starts right about here. This is all water up to this point. So urine starts right about to this point. So the idea in terms of some sodium that gets kicked out for the thing is what's happening. Okay, this goes to the collecting duct. This goes to the bladder and the urine.
So urea is a waste product.
Yes.
Of the bloodstream.
Yes.
Where does that pop into?
So your urea, when it's too high of a electrolyte type thing, will kick in on this side right here. Okay. So don't sweat it right now. We're coming back and we're talking this again and again and again and again.
So how does all that work if someone does severely dehydrated?
Great question. How do you think it's going to work?
Not very well.
It's going to work poorly and be more difficult because it's not as.
So what do you think is going to be released for somebody that is severely dehydrated? We talked about this morning. What was that? 88. 88 is going to try to hang on to that fluid. So a lot of that is not excreted. But when it is excreted, Joe, over time somebody's been vomiting or diarrhea over days, then that's the reason that they're hyponatremic, sodium so out of whack, potassium so out of whack. This is still doing its thing, just not doing it real efficiently. Makes sense? So check this out as well, because it won't be the last time you hear it, but let me draw it out now. So then how does it work with a diabetic? How does this work with a diabetic?
Diabetics urinate a lot more.
Yeah.
You don't control that.
Yeah.
So they can lose a lot of electrolytes and stuff because they're urinating so much.
Perfect. Okay, so let's take that just one step further. Do we have any diabetics in here, if you mind talking about it at all? No diabetics? Okay. So there were 9 diabetics. We continue to regulate very well through this until our glucose gets to about 180. Okay? Reabsorb very well, no big deal at all. Anything with a glucose above 180, we start diuresing. We start kicking out urine and water in a huge So to the point of you have somebody that's hyperglycemic, not hyperglycemic, will start kicking out a lot of water because the body cannot reabsorb all that glucose that's on board. Okay? So to the point of a diabetic, this becomes a workload in terms of somebody being very, very dry. This is the reason why somebody with hyperglycemia, they're so dry, their skin is dry, their vessel system is down, it goes on and on in terms of a lot of different things going on with those folks, but it starts right here. This is what's happening. Let me see if I miss anything. Going through all those pictures. Let me just take a real quick look here. So glomerulus again is this capsule right here, what we're talking about. This whole thing. So in this area right here that's kicking out fluids and electrolytes and lights up, what we're talking about here is pores are large enough to permit passage of organic waste, but cannot prevent the passage of water, ions, and nutrients, meaning that they're going to move on to somewhere else. They don't go out through the glomerulus, they go out somewhere else in the system. So we talked about the proximal convoluted tubule, closest to the glomerulus. 60 to 70% of filtrate takes place there. Reclaims almost all glucose, amino acids, and organic nutrients. You notice it doesn't say that it reabsorbs a bunch of water in the ground spot, right? So it's all about electrolytes and glucose. Select reabsorption of sodium from the tubular fluid. Process takes place by diffusion in terms of moving on itself. Yeah.
So with the hyperglycemic, this would kind of shut down the absorption of all this stuff, and it would just flush water out.
This right here, yes.
Oh.
So this descending loop right here is this right here, travels towards the renal pelvis. Ascending loop is this right here. Returns to the cortex, ends at a bend, comes in close contact with the glomerulus, and no longer filtration of water. So like I was telling you before, the idea that water reabsorption happens on this side, not so much on this side. This is almost exclusively toxins and poisons and ions and the likes of that get kicked out right here. The distal convoluted tubule is an active secretion of ions, acids, drugs, and toxins when it just got busy. All right, let's see this play.
The kidneys are considered our most important organs of excretion. They eliminate a couple of different things, water being the most important, but also nitrogenous waste. What was the nitrogenous waste, the nitrogen waste? Urea, very good. Urea, water, electrolytes, and various toxins and drugs. So the urinary system very simply includes these structures. The kidneys are responsible for forming urine from the blood. They basically filter the blood and create the urine. The ureters carry the urine from the kidneys to the bladder. The bladder is just a temporary storage area for the urine. And the urethra is the tube that carries the urine from the bladder to the outside of the body. All right, so we're going to start with the kidneys. They're in the posterior aspect of the abdomen in the flank area. They're outside of the peritoneum, so we call them retroperitoneal, but behind the peritoneal membrane. They're protected by the ribs, renal fascia, and adipose tissue. Adipose tissue, you already know, is like fat. There's a thick pad of fat that surrounds the kidneys to help protect them. So very simply, 2 kidneys, 2 ureters, 1 bladder, 1 urethra. Urethra and ureter look very similar. Be careful you don't confuse the two. 2 very different structures. The kidney has 3 distinct regions. It's got cortex and a medulla, and also something called the renal pelvis. And the renal pelvis is basically the open area in the middle. The cortex is the outer region, and the medulla is the deeper inner region. So So this opening in the middle here, this is called the renal pelvis. And basically it's a funnel shape, and that's the opening to the end of the ureter, the proximal ureter right here. These things in here, those are called the renal pyramids. They're triangle shaped. They make up the medulla. Anywhere from 8 to 18 of these little triangle shapes in your kidneys. And this outer portion out here is the cortex. Blood supply. Blood supply is important in the kidneys, and the blood supply comes from the renal artery, which comes right off the aorta. About 25% of our entire cardiac output goes to the kidneys. So the kidneys are very sensitive to changes in blood pressure. If the blood pressure goes down, then the kidneys don't have as much blood to filter. If they don't have as much blood to filter, then they don't have as much to make urine with. So one of the first things that happens when our blood pressure goes down is we make less urine. So what do the kidneys do? They do quite a lot. They excrete that urea, that nitrogen waste. They also secrete uric acid, ammonia, and creatinine. Creatinine is a byproduct of muscle breakdown. It's one of the end results of muscle breakdown. The kidneys are hugely important in regulating blood volume because they determine how much water leaves the body. So if they let go of a lot of water, our blood volume goes down. Right? Does that make sense? If they hold on to a lot of water, they reabsorb a lot of water, then our blood volume is going to go up. If our blood volume goes up, what happens to our blood pressure? Up. If the kidneys get rid of water, then our blood volume is going down and our blood pressure will go down. Right? Did you ever hear of anybody taking blood pressure pills that make them urinate a lot? They're water pills. They're getting rid of excess volume in the hopes that their blood pressure will come down. The kidneys can also regulate the electrolyte content of the blood. The kidneys can say, no, we need more sodium, I'm going to reabsorb more sodium. They say, oh, we got to get rid of some calcium, I'm going to get rid of some calcium. They can say, oh, we need more chloride, pull out the chloride. So they can regulate the electrolyte content of the blood. Okay, so not only the water volume, but how many electrolytes are coming and going. The kidneys play a major role in the regulation of acid-base balance. Again, they control how many hydrogen ions leave in the urine or get held onto in the blood. So if we hold on to hydrogen ions, we're holding on to acids, we're going to make the blood more acidic. If we let go of all those hydrogen ions, we're losing hydrogen ions, then the blood's going to become more alkaline. All right, they play a role in the regulation of blood pressure. How do the kidneys regulate blood pressure? I just told you. If they hold on to water, it's going to increase the blood pressure. If they excrete the water, it's going to lower the blood pressure. And the kidneys also play a role in the regulation of red blood cell production. Anybody remember how? The kidneys get the message that the oxygen level is low because there's fewer red blood cells. The red blood cell concentration is low, so the oxygen level is low. The juxtaglomerular nephrons get the message in the kidneys that the oxygen level is low. So they secrete a substance called erythropoietin. They secrete that, it goes to the bone marrow, tells the bone marrow to...
So this is what we were talking about earlier in terms of the bone marrow is the producer for red blood cells, yeah? But the idea in terms of how it gets that message is when somebody's hypoxic or somebody's in severe shock. A message gets sent to the bone marrow that you need to produce more red blood cells in terms of overcoming this. So that's how those two work together in terms of making this function.
Increase their blood cell production. It will continue to increase the blood cell production until the oxygen levels rise again, and then the kidneys shut off. Negative feedback.
Oh, I mean, that's pretty delayed, right?
Say again?
That's pretty delayed.
You know what? It's not all that slow. It's produced over a matter of hours in terms of trying to produce that. It's one of the faster things that the kidneys end up doing. So.
Now, we're going to take, we did the overall anatomy, kidneys, ureter, bladder, urethra. Now we're going to take the kidneys and look at the microscopic units, the little microscopic things going on inside the kidney. The nephron is the functional unit of the kidney. And there's millions of nephrons in each kidney. Looking at these tiny little microscopic functional units of the kidneys. These are the tiny little filters that will take the blood and turn it into urine. All right, so the nephron has two parts. It's composed of tubules, which are hollow tubes, and blood vessels. So you're going to know all of these parts. You will, trust me. Trust me, oh, Musa. This is what you need to know. This picture, all right? This is more accurately what it looks like. We simplify it to look like this, all right? So I'm going to do it on the board because sometimes it's easier to draw and explain as we go along. Okay. So the first part of the nephron is a big tangle or a cluster of blood vessels. So blood flow comes in this way. It goes through this tangle of blood vessels, and then it leaves this way. Okay? And there are millions of these in each kidney. This is like in and then out. This structure right here is called the glomerulus. The glomerulus is blood vessels. So basically, this little artery here is part of a whole series of little arteries that came off the aorta. Remember I said the aorta sends a lot of blood to the kidneys, so it's coming this way. Around the glomerulus, we start with the tubules, hollow tubes. And the first part of the hollow tube is like a cup, and it sits right over that cluster, that ball of blood vessels. And this first part is called Bowman's capsule. So Bowman's capsule just simply sits like a cup or like a hood around the glomerulus. The next part of the tubule is a twisty, turny, windy type of tubule. I just did a couple of waves here because it's really hard to draw, but I'll show you the picture again. It's very twisted and topsy-turvy kind of. This part of the tubule is called the proximal convoluted tubule. What's proximal mean? Closer to the beginning or closer to the point of attachment? So proximal here is closer to the beginning. How about convoluted? What's convoluted mean? Convoluted means not straight. So proximal convoluted tubule is the twisty, turny tubule that's closer to the beginning. That's all it means. Then it takes a turn and goes this way. It's going down. So we call that the descending limb, right? Because it's going down. Descending limb, and then it makes a turn and comes back up. This turn right here is called the loop of Henle. Not Helen, Henle. So this was the descending limb. What do you think this one is? Ascending limb, very simple. After you hit the ascending limb, then you get another twisty, turny, windy tubule. If this one was proximal, what is it going to be? Distal. So this is the distal convoluted tubule. Okay? That's the basic structure of the nephron. Then a bunch of these tubules connect into this structure here. There's fewer of these. This is the collecting duct. And the collecting duct dumps into a place called the callus. So that's the basic structure of the nephron. Now, just as an overview, blood filters through the glomerulus. Blood is being pushed, the strength of the blood being pushed out of the heart pushes the blood through the glomerulus. So it's being pushed through here. As it gets pushed through the glomerulus, there's holes in the walls of the glomerulus. And as it's being pushed through, most of the water and dissolved substances in the blood get pushed out of these blood vessels and into Bowman's capsule. Anybody remember what the transport mechanism was called that uses a push? Filtration, very good. Filtration. This is the best example of filtration in the body right here. The substances are not moving from high to low concentration, which would be what? Diffusion. Remember, high to low concentration concentration with diffusion. They're not moving because of the difference in concentration. They're moving because they're being pushed through. It's like if you consider the walls of the glomerulus made of like mesh, so just the water and small particles get through, and when they go through, they get collected in this first part of the tubule, which is Bowman's capsule. If you think about blood, blood is not just blood cells, right? Blood is water, electrolytes, nutrients, proteins, all kinds of stuff. When it goes through the glomerulus, the red blood cells are too big, the proteins are too big, they can't get through the walls of the glomerulus, but everything else can. The water can, sodium ions, chloride ions, calcium ions, that kind of stuff can get pushed through here, especially the water. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the slide for just a minute. Glomerulus there, Bowman's capsule, proximal convoluted tubule, descending limb, loop of Henle, ascending limb, distal convoluted tubule, collecting duct. You need to know that pathway. This is more what it looks like. Simply, very simply, these are all urine tubes. This is showing you how the blood vessels surround those tubes. And the name of those blood vessels are peritubular capillary. What does peri mean? Around. So they're peritubular, they're the capillaries that are around the tubule. That's all it means. And I said the collecting ducts dump into the calyx or the calyces. That's these little regions right here. These little pieces that come off the renal pelvis. That's the calyx. The calyces open up into the renal pelvis, and the renal pelvis dumps into the urine.
Questions about that? Again, don't freak about it. We will, before we're done, we'll probably go over this thing about 10 times. Start to get it down, you know, and back. Fair enough. All right, so primary purpose of urine, then it's maintaining homeostasis. Yeah, okay, but what? But what? So what Joe was talking about earlier, if somebody is exceedingly dehydrated, ADH is going to be released in terms of trying to keep fluids on board, versus that it was just the opposite, that it's going to be kicking off water in terms of making things happen. Okay, so this again is a teeter-totter back and forth, back and forth, back and forth in terms of how much fluid should be released versus how much it's kept on board. Three main ways that we talked about: urea, creatinine, and uric acid. We talked about this in terms of the tubules, that diffusion is the way that it gets kicked out. Water reabsorption occurs passively through osmosis. So both osmosis and diffusion is taking place here. She talked about filtration pressure in the glomerulus that is pushed through, although it's very specific in terms of what gets kicked out. So renin-angiotensin system. We talked about this earlier. The glomerular filtration rate, as to how quickly it all gets kicked out. By the first step, essential to all kidney functions. If filtration does not occur, then the problem is going to be the waste products are not excreted. The waste products will sit around, only making this worse. This right here is an example in terms of geriatric population that are taking a bunch of different medications and their kidneys are working well. This would be the classic thing of what happens when that drug sits on board for a long, long time. pH then is going to be a problem, and issues in terms of blood volume regulation is eliminated. So, angiotensin II, ADH, aldosterone, adrenasergic peptide we talked about earlier, having function as far as the aorta. Okay? This, and renin all play a part in terms of kidney. Renin, angiotensin II, ADH, and aldosterone, all major hormones as far as the kidney goes. So we're getting ready to walk into the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, or ROS. All right, so I can see it in your faces. Everybody stand up for just a couple minutes. Shake it off. We got about 10 to 15 minutes yet. Folks, hang in there. But you need to, where we're going, you need to be tuned into what we're talking about. Crazy thing about what we're talking about is this takes place over a minute or a second. For all the time you've been sitting here for 4 hours now. For all the time you've been sitting here, this continues to function second by second by second by second. The idea that you just stood up is already a function in terms of the kidneys adapting to that for homeostasis. Crazy from thinking about it, right? All right, you guys good to go? All right, here we go. So in terms of the kidneys, not just by itself, okay, but like everything else we've been talking about in terms of organ systems this morning, okay, that things work together, okay. So the kidneys is doing the lion's share of the work in terms of the things we're talking about. But the liver has to play a part in this. I'll show you how in just a second. And the lungs play a part in this, a huge part in this, in terms of the overall scheme of things. And don't forget about the brain, because the brain is remember the control center for all this taking place. And we're not going to get specifically into this in a huge way. We'll talk about it, but this kind of works together in terms of these three things work together in terms of production of blood pressure and heart rate and ADH and hormones. So those are the three that we're going to be spending most of our time with. All right, so here comes the pain. Going to last for about 5 or 10 minutes. We'll come right back out of it again, and then we'll keep talking about this until I goes on. Okay? So it's called the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, or ROS. It's a negative feedback loop that concerns the kidneys. So the kidneys is part of this. The brain is part of this. The kidneys that we talked about react to the decreased blood flow in arterioles by secreting renin. What's renin again? What's renin? It's a hormone, right? It's a hormone specializing in the kidney. That's where it lives, that's where it's produced, that's where it's excreted from. Okay? So renin, kidneys, is used to hear it now. So when there's decreased blood flow coming to the kidneys, the renin goes, hey, I need to be kicked out of here and do something in terms of blood pressure. So renin is a hormone that is responsible for all that. That's where it starts. Renin converts something that's called angiotensin, which is released by the liver, which then turns into something that's called angiotensin 1. Right. I'm going to show you a diagram with this as well here in just a second, so you can clarify a little bit. All right, so somebody help me out. What happens to the kidneys? When there's decreased blood supply, what happens to the kidneys? Renin is kicked out, right? Renin is that hormone that gets kicked out. Where's renin headed to? Liver. What happens to the liver? Angiotensin is released from the liver, which is another hormone. This turns into angiotensin 1. Okay so far?
So renin and the angiotensin, they have to interact.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so
yeah. So they play in the same sandbox together, but they're converting to something else. Yes. All right. I'll let you write, and then we'll talk. Can I go? All right. So remember, the pathway is moved, right? Renin, angiotensin, angiotensin 1. So it reaches the lungs. Next stop, if this is a train, next stop, lungs. So here's what happens in the lungs. There's something that's called angiotensin converting enzyme, or ACE. Have you ever heard of ACE inhibitors before? ACE inhibitors is a group of drugs. ACE inhibitors is about controlling blood pressure. I wonder why that's a big deal here. Because we're talking about blood pressure in the end, right? So what happens in the lungs is that in a pure world, we're talking about the fact this gets converted into angiotensin 2. The way the means for having that is this angiotensin converting enzyme, or ACE. So it takes that hormone, it's now going to convert into angiotensin 2, and then big things start happening from there. We're getting toward the end of the train line with this, guys. So it transforms it to angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 is a powerful vasoconstrictor. So what is it going to do with the vessel? Remember, the original thing was there wasn't enough blood supply, right? So what's it going to do with the blood vessel? So you constrict it, okay? So the idea that if it constricts it, what's going to happen with blood pressure? Which is exactly what we want, right? You with me so far? All right. So also stimulates anti-diuretic hormone, which is where do we say that was this morning? Pituitary glands, right? So in the brain, in terms of releasing that. Hey, you need to hang on in terms of the anti-diuretic hormone, giving up too much fluid. Okay? So it kicks in, that fluid is now going to be retained, being kicked out. Make sense? And aldosterone, that we haven't talked a whole lot about yet today. Aldosterone is another hormone that gets released. Aldosterone is released from the adrenal cortex. What happens there? What do we say the adrenal cortex is about? Epinephrine and norepinephrine, right? And so what's it going to do in terms of heart rate? It's going to increase it. So if you want to know the picture about shock, folks, this is it right here. This is what happens when somebody's in shock right here. It's going to hang on to fluid. It's going to work harder and harder in terms of vasoconstriction. It's going to increase the heart rate, and hopefully then it's going to reabsorb the shock is now stabilized. Okay? This is the body's means of taking care of business right here. Okay?
So if they have a severe injury to the peritoneal cavity
Yes.
and a kidney injury,
Yes.
are they not going to compensate?
Not well. Not well. And you might not even suspect the fact that you're bleeding out into the upper peritoneal area, and can't get your finger on it as to why the blood pressure is so dang low. But this is a consideration.
So this is raising not only it's raising your sodium content and your fluid content. Is that a positive feedback, or is that part of the need?
It's a negative feedback.
That's part of the need.
It's trying to maintain business as usual. Okay, yeah.
Can you touch on again real quick how increasing sodium is going to help you? If you increase the sodium in fluid, what does that do?
So all it's doing is with the electrolyte, it's maintaining it so you don't become hyponatremic.
Okay.
So if you were to kick out a bunch of fluid along the way, you become hyponatremic with it. That's all it's doing. All right. So let's walk back through it together. A picture is worth 1,000 words. All right. From here, kidneys on either side. Renin is released. Renin is the hormone that we talked about, right? So it's going to meet up with the liver. Liver is producing angiotensin, okay? Turns into angiotensin 1 at this point. It's headed to the lungs. The lungs, it's going to come along with ACE, angiotensin converting enzyme. It's going to convert it into angiotensin 2, okay? It happens, angiotensin 2 then is going to work on the adrenal cortex, the adrenal medulla. It's going to work on the heart. It's going to work on all the rest of the body systems in terms of what it's doing. Okay? But with that, then aldosterone is released. Aldosterone is going to have an effect on epinephrine and norepinephrine. It's going to have an effect in terms of releasing ADH. So there's sodium in water that gets retained, blood pressure increases, and that continues on and on and on and on. Yeah.
So are renin and angiotensin the same time?
Yeah, great question. Generally, yes. So the message goes to the kidney, and yet the liver will be sensitive to what's going on with it as well. So absolutely. Okay. A little bit to get your head around, right?
So does the angiotension tube trigger the adrenals?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Sure does. Okay. So check this out. When would this happen and not be a good thing? We said that shock, absolutely needed. That's what the body stabilizes. When would this happen and not be a good thing? Yeah, there you go. Hypertension is the boy. Okay. So imagine this: that we're hypertensive, we're chronic hypertension over a long, long period of time, right? And what happens with our blood vessels when we become chronic hypertension? So vasoconstriction, right? So the idea that the message goes to the kidney saying you need to do your thing. There's not enough blood supply coming to the kidneys, and the kidneys does its thing. Okay. Here's the whole reason why folks are on blood pressure medications, and the blood pressure medications might be in the kidneys itself with a diuretic. It might be along the way in terms of trying to block this. It might be along the way of trying to block this. It might be along the way in terms of blocking this. We're going to talk about all those groups of drugs in life here. And so there's certain ways that physicians will end up treating blood pressure depending on what they want to accomplish, but it all is about the system right here. Make sense? Okay. So much more to come on this. Hang in there, folks. So I've got it here, but I'm not gonna hang out here. All this is saying is that within the brain itself, it's another way of regulating this. The bottom line is, if somebody is shocking, the brain plays a function in terms of saying, kidneys, you can do your thing. But if this person is hypertension, then the messages get mixed. And that's what we'll talk about some other day. I'm not going to hang out here. We talked about this already, or to a certain degree, we talked about this already in terms of urine is a part of this, urinary bladder is part of this, urethra is part of this. But when somebody has a kidney infection, or somebody has a bladder infection, then the idea that the blood, or excuse me, the idea in terms of urine comes out in dribbles versus a regular stream. And so this is the reason why it's painful in terms of urinary, somebody trying to urinate, is because something's going on either with the bladder or with the kidney itself. Speaking of bladder, containing thing right here. So it hangs on to urine at a given time. So the fact that you feel an urge to go pee is about that it will maintain a certain amount of urine before it ends up being released and remind you that it needs to get released. So two things I want you to know for right now. The idea that it normally hangs on to about 30 centimeters, not a whole lot. And yet it can hang on to it, it can expand and hang on to, and if you haven't peed for a while and you feel the real urge to go, the idea that it can hang on to much, much more. But average is about 30 centimeters within the ureter itself. The ureter contracts every 30 seconds. So it's this contraction that moves the fluid forward, that moves the urine forward in terms of moving towards the bladder. When we talk about kidney stones or calculi stones, we're talking about calcium deposits, magnesium salts, and uric acid crystals. All make up a portion of the kidney stones. Talked about this a second ago, but the idea that the urinary bladder can hold a fair amount in terms of the overall thing. It can hold up to 1 liter of urine. Fair amount.
30 centimeters,
that was just for the ureter itself. There you go.
Oh,
just for the ureter.
Oh, okay.
So one other thing I want you to know about this, the idea in terms of when are these patients at risk, especially with trauma? When are these patients at risk, especially with trauma, with bladder? Yeah, so the idea with bladder sits right about here. So seatbelt comes just to the superior side of that, okay? If you're sitting with a bladder that's full, and you end up with a blunt trauma to that, it's going to be that much worse in terms of not only trauma to the bladder, but the fact that the urine then will be spilled to certain areas of the body. Not good. Okay? It's one of the reasons why these patients can be so sick, just based on this type of trauma. The urethra itself is very, very short, especially in females. The idea that kidney infections, one of the reasons that kidney infections are so prominent in females is because of this very thing right here. That's enough of that. You okay?
I have a question, Barry.
Yeah.
Just really quick, if you were to say rush through the bladder or you're into the cavity, would that be something you would be able to pick up on in the field at all? Other than just noticing it.
And truly, you can have some folks that end up with a type of trauma that might go home and realize 2 or 3 days later that they're sick, infected sick. Yeah. Along with the pain that goes along with it as well. Yeah, but I'll tell you, I've had a patient who 2 or 3 days after a very significant lung trauma ended up saying, I don't feel well. I wonder why. All right, what questions do you have? Where's that, right? I can't get it all over. You know, it doesn't work that way. So this is kind of the pace, and especially with me, this will be the pace. If I talk fast for you, that will be part of the acclimatization that you're going to have with me, right? But the idea that I always will stop and time out in terms of where you're at. Don't understand something, then keep your hand up, okay? The idea that you got to do, and this goes back to what we were talking about the other day, the idea that you got to do your part coming into this. There's no way that I can take if you haven't done your work coming into this sort of thing and try to explain it to you. Okay? You got to do your part, I'll do my part, and together we'll do okay. Fair enough? All right, so what's happening for Monday? Cardiac? You got 3 chapters to get into. So listen to me for just a second. Big time, that you take a look at those 3 chapters. You're ready to go on Monday. We've got a lot for you. We've narrowed it down as much as we possibly can for you for right now, but there's a lot of stuff, a lot of material that you can be covering on Monday morning. That's great. We'll be in to do that for you. Okay. Take a look. If I'm you, I would be taking a look at Dropbox as far as those PowerPoints as well. So let me come out to that because I just thought about it. We are. I updated those Dropbox presentations for these lectures that's coming up on Monday, but I have a feeling that we probably will be updating them come Monday morning when he gets done making these changes. So if you come in on Monday morning and I'm showing you something different in terms of Dropbox, that's where we're coming from. Okay? It's all pretty good. Oh, it is. You're going to do a test. We'll talk about the following week past that. But that's it. Anybody else or anything else? All right, have a great weekend. I'll see you on Monday morning.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
The schedule. When has the assignments? When do those start? That week when it has the assignments.
So that day.
I don't have it.
So for example, so all we're doing is